a co-president of the International Peace Bureau. It is both an honor and a privilege to welcome you all to this MacBride Peace Ceremony for Hiroshi Taka of Japan. During these challenging times, it is important to take a pause for moments of celebration, to remember and honor the man to whom this award is named after, and to be inspired by both his life, his work, and his heart. We have an awardee today, and we are honoring him with the MacBride Award. Our ceremony will be simple, but hopefully meaningful and heartwarming. And moving on, I would like to call on Seán Connor. Seán, where are you?
Right here.
Our IPB Executive Director, to provide us an introduction of the International Peace Bureau and the history of the MacBride Peace Award. So, Seán?
Great, thank you. I think there's a presentation coming up alongside this, but I'll start in the meantime. I was originally hoping to talk a little bit more about Taka-san today, but I was instructed specifically to speak a little bit of the history because we will be hearing so many other wonderful contributions on your life and your work. But what is most interesting is how similar Taka-san's life and work has been to that of Seán MacBride and all his accomplishments over the years. So I hope as I reflect on Seán MacBride's life and the reason why the prize is in his name, you will also think of Taka-san and the relations to his work. So the man for whom IPB's Peace Prize was named was likewise a lifelong activist for peace and justice. His origins were in anti-colonial resistance in his home country of Ireland, where he fought as part of the Irish Republican Army and took part in the Irish War of Independence, leading to his imprisonment under abysmal conditions. Turning to political channels to make a change, he founded his own political party, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here, so bear with me, Clan na Poblacha, dedicated to peace, human rights, and progressive policies. This included the rights for political prisoners and prisoners of war. In government, he served as a minister for external affairs and was crucial to the acceptance of the European Convention on Human Rights. He later became the president of the Council of Foreign Ministers in the Council of Europe and vice president of the Organization for European Economic Cooperation. MacBride was a leading figure in a range of international institutions, serving as secretary of the Irish section of the League Against Imperialism as early as 1929. He was the co-founder and then later the international chair of Amnesty International from 1961 until 1975 and secretary general of the International Commission of Jurists from 1963 until 1971. MacBride then came to lead the International Peace Bureau as treasurer, then chair, and finally as president. And it was under his leadership that IPB became the secretariat of Special NGO Committee on Disarmament and held an international conference on disarmament, leading the call for a UN conference under the same theme, which came to fruition in 1978. Similarly, it was under MacBride's leadership that IPB visited Gensuikyo in Japan to organize an international symposium on atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Seán MacBride was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1974 for mobilizing the conscience of the world in the fight against injustice. He also received the Lenin Peace Prize, one of only 2 people to receive both prizes. And he won these prizes for what he himself referred to as fighting against absolutely obscene arms race, and later also received the UNESCO Silver Medal for service. MacBride had a sizable influence on the creation of the constitutions for many independent African nations and served in a number of UN positions, from Assistant Secretary General to President of the General Assembly and the High Commissioner for Namibia. Seán MacBride's legacy lives on through his very own Peace Prize, which since 1992 has been awarded to a wide range of activists. Now we'll go to the next slide here and show some of the recipients in the past. For 2022, we had alongside Taka-san, two other awardees, Fred Lubang, who many of us know from Nonviolence International, and then Yuri Sheliazenko and Azia Gagieva, Ukrainian and Russian peace activists working to fight against the war in Ukraine. We have a couple other awardees in the next slides here. Very quickly, for 2020, we had awards for Black Lives Matter and the International Signature Campaign in support of the appeal of the Hibakusha for the elimination of nuclear weapons. And in 2019, we awarded Bruce Kent the prize. You can see some pictures from his ceremony here. And although he is no longer with us, we remember him quite fondly here in this room and throughout this weekend here today. We also had Elaine White Gomez, who we awarded the prize with earlier this year, and also the Association for Historical Dialogue and Research and Home for Cooperation in Cyprus. Some other awardees, Noam Chomsky in 2017, with the ceremony and the pictures in 2018, as well as the All Okinawa Coalition against the construction of new bases in Hinoko. The ceremony was in Barcelona in 2017. So thank you, and we look forward to celebrating with you, Taka-san. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sean. We shall now listen. I'm not looking at my floor director.
Yes. Listen to the music.
We shall now hear the honorary speech by Sergio Duarte, the former United Nations High Representative for Disarmament.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are honoring today an outstanding personality in the effort of civil society to promote peace, international solidarity, and nuclear disarmament. Mr. Hiroshi Taka fully deserves the Seán MacBride Award. I had the privilege of knowing personally Hiroshi Taka, or Taka-san in Japanese, and to have worked with him in a number of occasions, both in Hiroshima, in Nagasaki, and in New York. I met him for the first time in Hiroshima when I was the United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. And in that capacity, I used to represent the Secretary General of the United Nations at the peace ceremony every August 6th in Hiroshima. In 2007, I went to Hiroshima for that purpose for the first time and was invoked by Gensuikyo to attend their main rally at a facility facing the hotel where I was staying. I was impressed by the number of young people present. I was told some 2,000 of them. They all paid close attention to the speeches and musical acts and cheered the foreign participants. May I share with you some highlights of the life and accomplishment of Mr. Hiroshi Taka. He was born 78 years ago in Kirunuma Prefecture. Early in life, he began his militant service in civil society organizations in the cause of peace. As a student in humanities and sciences at Chiba University, Taka confesses that he was more interested in student politics than in his studies. He joined the student movement and won a leading post at the student union and later at the National Federation of Student Unions. Upon his graduation, he became a full-time staffer at the Coalition of Youth and Student Organizations and worked against the military security treaty between the United States and Japan. From 1970 to 1974, he worked at the Secretariat of the World Federation of Democratic Youth in Budapest. During this period, he took part in several international conferences in Stockholm, Paris, Rome, and other cities. He was also involved in solidarity activities and visited Chile in 1972 and Vietnam in 1973. In October 1984, he started work at Gensuikyo National Office in Japan, specializing in international relations. His first job was connected with the hosting of an international consultation on the launching of a signature campaign in support of the appeal from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The campaign spanned more than 150 countries worldwide and gathered over 100 million signatures, of which 60 million were from Japan alone. The Peace Wave campaign, jointly proposed by Global Chain of Grassroots Actions and peace movements in the United States and the Soviet Union, for the common objective of eliminating those weapons. The work went on with the signature campaign to promote the appeal from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The campaign collected more than 150 million signatures worldwide, of which 60 million, as I said, in Japan alone. 1967 marked important achievements in disarmament activities. It was then that the Treaty on Intermediary Range Nuclear Forces, better known as the INF Treaty, was signed between the United States and the Soviet Union. The treaty banned all of the two nations' land-based ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and missile launchers with short and intermediary medium range. Both nations eliminated 2,692 missiles by 1991, and for the next 10 years conducted regular on-site verification inspections. It was at this time that the World Conference Against A and H Bombs launched the Peace Wave campaign, jointly proposed by peace movements in the United States and the Soviet Union. In 1987, American Soviet peace organizations proposed the launching of the Peace Wave campaign. It was launched by the World Conference Against A and H Bombs. The campaign started in 1987, coinciding with the opening of the 10th United Nations Disarmament Week. It was held during 5 consecutive years. All this time, Taka was busy with the international coordination for global action. In the mid-1970s, the effects of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were still insufficiently studied and understood. Gensuikyo and the International Peace Bureau, the IPB, started working together with other Japanese organizations and proposed the convening of an international symposium on the damage and after the effects of the 8 bombings, which took place in Japan in 1977. Seán MacBride played a key role in organizing international sponsorship and the actual running of the symposium. The objective was to spread knowledge of the full dimension of the atomic attacks on the 2 cities and of the plight of the Hibakusha. Taka started attending the executive boarding meetings of IPB in 1984, when IPB decided for the first time to recommend Hibakusha for the Nobel Peace Prize. As he recalls, it was originally an initiative of the Greek independent peace movement. He also recalls the organization of the Nuclear Warfare Tribunal by a group of young lawyers from the United Kingdom and the work done to bring its ruling in line with the appeal from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Through his activity in the promotion of peace, Taka intensified and broadened his interaction with leaders and activists of peace movements, as well as with dedicated diplomats and political leaders. He made a special effort to develop cooperation between grassroots movements, other NGOs, and representatives of governments who share the goals of eliminating nuclear weapons. He particularly recalls the role of the late Mexican ambassador Miguel Marin Bosch during the 1995 NPT Review and Extension Conference. He invited Ambassador Bosch to come to Hiroshima, and his invitation was promptly accepted. In Taka's own words, the acceptance of the 2000 NPT Review Conference by the 5 nuclear weapon states of the unequivocal undertaking to achieve the complete elimination of nuclear arsenals opened a new prospect for progress. Coupled with anti-war actions in the early 21st century, Gensuikyo launched a new signature campaign to urge the Nuclear Five to abolish their nuclear weapons now. The more than 5,400,000 signatures collected in that campaign were presented to the United Nations General Assembly in the hall of the General Assembly, to myself, as in my capacity as chair of the 2005 NPT Review Conference. Taka was impressed by the fact that although the 2005 Review Conference did not achieve a consensus, it changed his perception of the NPT. Until then, he considered the treaty a typical unequal arrangement meant to ensure the nuclear monopoly of the 5 states recognized as nuclear weapon states. But then he realized that the treaty would in fact be used as an instrument on which more and more governments could rely to lead in the search for a world free of nuclear weapons. Despite the lack of agreement at that conference, his experience in April and May in New York showed that united, people could emerge as a second superpower, as the New York Times wrote, and even develop into the first superpower in determining the future course of humanity. At the 2010 NPT Review Conference, more than 1,800 people went to New York, with many more signatures to present. The final document of the conference declared its goal to achieve the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons. The 2010 World Conference Against A and H bombs in August of that year received many outstanding leaders of both peace movements and governments, including Reiner, Joe, and Cora, as well as ambassadors from the United Nations, Mexico, Norway, Malaysia, Egypt, and others. Hiroshi Taka stepped down as General Secretary of Gensuikyo in February 2011 and assumed the post of Representative Director in order to ensure the smooth succession of leadership from generation to generation. Yet he continues to play an important role to support the incumbent leaders while joining in the grassroots work, such as regular street signature campaigns, annual peace marches, and other specific actions like anti-war rallies and office work. The award of the Seán MacBride Prize to him was a surprise. With typical Japanese modesty, he said he had no particularly noticeable merit for which to receive any award. However, many friends persuaded him that the prize is actually not only to him, but also to thousands of grassroots campaigners and peaceniks, including Hibakusha, who bear in their shoulders heavy everyday activities for a nuclear weapon-free, peaceful, and just world. Thus, Taka decided to accept the prize, remembering the noble spirit of Seán MacBride. Today, the world seems to be repeating the worst times of its history with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the annexation of Ukrainian territories, besides nuclear threats voiced by authorities, including President Putin himself. Nuclear weapon states continue to develop new weapons that are faster and more lethal than any built before. There seems to be little enthusiasm in their capitals of the nuclear weapon states, for taking forward nuclear disarmament. Yet, Taka believes that the power of the people against nuclear weapons is immensely stronger. That was plain to see at the first meeting of states party to the TPNW in Vienna in June, as well as the speeches of a large number of delegations at the 10th NPT Review Conference last August in this year, 2022. The whole world, and in particular the people's peace movements, are indebted to Hiroshi Taka. Through his dedicated, selfless, and indefatigable work, he set an example for the older and younger generations. He is indeed a worthy recipient of the Seán MacBride Award. Thank you.
This practically sums up the life, the heart, and the passion of Hiroshi Taka. I'd like to call on him now as we present.
Taka-san, it is an absolute honor to present you with the Seán MacBride Peace Prize. We have for you here a certificate and the Seán MacBride medal. We get out here to show you as well, produced by Quite Quiet, who so kindly has offered to give us the prize every year. There you have Seán MacBride Peace Prize.
Sean, you can do this.
We shall now listen to you.
First, thank you, Ambassador Duarte, for wonderful introduction. I was meditating that way for the first time since I was born. Thank you very much. And dear IPB leaders and board members, friends. Dear friends attending here in person and online, I want to thank you for awarding me this honorable prize named after our most respected late Seán MacBride, and renew our determination with all friends who share with me this honor to make full steps towards a world free of nuclear weapons. The ongoing indiscriminate Russian attacks on citizens and cities in Ukraine and growing fear of possible use of nuclear weapons are showing us that the reinforcement and modernization of nuclear weapons, massive build-up of military arsenals, expansion of military alliances prompted by nuclear power leaders and their allies in the name of security and strategic balance are simply wrong. And that they are the very causes which are endangering the world and claiming the human lives. The answer was already given 77 years ago when the world adopted the UN Charter and when the UN General Assembly adopted the first resolution in the following year, pledging to eliminate atomic weapons from nuclear arsenal at the national arsenals. Why do they not endeavor to resolve complex world problems and conflicts by peaceful means? Why do they give no heed to the voices of Hibakusha, the people who narrowly survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Why do they not abide by these grand rules of world peace? Herein lies the reason why we say now is the time for the anti-nuclear peace movement working at grassroots and their network IPB to play their proper role to build up massive public opinion and their actions. My memory of Seán MacBride, though it was only in a short span of a few years in the 1980s, I often met with Seán in the regular meetings of IPB and the special NGO committee for disarmament in Geneva, when he was the president of both of them. It still remains vividly in my memory. In February 1985, following the years when massive anti-nuclear demonstrations continued everywhere in the world, we invited peace organizations from 11 countries to Tokyo to hold consultations on issuing an appeal for a global signature campaign. The appeal was entitled The Appeal from Hiroshima and Nagasaki for a total ban and the elimination of nuclear weapons. It was an ambitious plan to build consensus in support of a total ban on nuclear weapons at the grassroots level world over, including the nuclear powers, to overcome the strategic balance argument that still dominated their politics. The Soviet Peace Committee hesitated to come, but altogether 12 organizations, including ours, attended and agreed on the text. The appeal declared the use of nuclear weapons as immoral, illegal, and a crime against the human community, and called for a total ban and elimination of nuclear weapons as the most urgent and vital task for the very survival of the human race. It was an epoch-making appeal, I believe. No sooner was the text agreed than my boss, Koichi Akamatsu, and I left for Geneva to attend a meeting of the Special NGO Committee for Disarmament and asked for support from its members. Many friends expressed their support, but there were also opinions that still stood on the strategic balance thinking and unable to immediately support the abolition. Notwithstanding, Seán MacBride, then chairing the meeting, proposed immediately, without a minute of hesitation, to adopt it right away, saying, "This is a simple and clear message." The proposal was not adopted there after all, and I asked members to bring it back to their organizations and examine it for endorsement. After 3 years, the appeal from Hiroshima and Nagasaki was taken up again by the NGO Forum held in Geneva in April 1988. About 1 month before the UN Special Session on Disarmament in its third time, and recommendation was adopted by it to call on the SSD3 to set a total ban and the elimination of nuclear weapons in its agenda as the most urgent and vital task. The second peace wave, the international joint action at grassroots that encircled the globe, along with the Earth's self-rotation to achieve the elimination of nuclear weapons, took place. It was the parallel with SSD3. Actions were organized in more than 70 countries, and even thus in the Soviet Union, the peace organization took up this campaign, collected signatures nationwide in support of the appeal, and launched even a ship in Black Sea to throw away nuclear missiles, not the real one, unfortunately. Seán died on January the 15th, 1988, but his determined action remains sharp in my heart as an example of the attitude to take in facing an existential problem for the humankind. Then abolition of nuclear weapons continue to grow in the world. How many more seconds will the hands of the doomsday clock move closer to midnight in next January? Or will they have already reached zero by then? The crisis is not only in Ukraine. On October the 15th, one day before my departure for Ghent here, the North Korea announced that the launching of the 7 ballistic missiles was a part of the exercise of its tactical nuclear weapon operation unit and a stern warning against USS Ronald Reagan and its carrier strike group deployed at around Japan. Anxiety is spread, and the heightened fear, the tendency to rely on nuclear umbrella or military alliance, or for the build-up of already 2 huge military arsenals is growing. Yet, if we lose sight of the globally rising prospect for a nuclear-free peace world, it will be a serious error. The answer is already clear in the field of nuclear disarmament. Amid the said crisis, the first meeting of the state parties to the TPNW was attended not only by the state parties, but also by Norway, Germany, and Netherlands, and Australia as observers. And the number of the state parties and those who newly signed the treaty increased to 68 and 91, respectively. Even in the countries whose governments have shown hostility to the treaty, such as Japan, the support of the treaty by the majority of the people remains evident. The result of the NPT review conference in August was more evident and eloquent. The media reported it was a failure because no agreement was reached on the outcome document. Yet many people who followed the conference deliberations reached a quite different conclusion. Most speakers who took the microphone in the closing session on August 6th eloquently made clear in their own 1 or 2 minute speeches where the true problem lied. All of them pointed out that it was because simply the P5, permanent 5, including Russia, refused to implement Article 6 and even all agreements reached by the past review conferences and clung to the status quo of the nuclear monopoly. In other words, except those problematic states and their followers, and the world is united in the demand for nuclear abolition. The problem is with these nuclear 5, or maybe +4 more, and the allies that cling to the nuclear umbrella. This means that the change is up to the decision of the sovereign people of these countries, and that the key to it is in the hands of our peace movements. Given that the TPNW is in force, we should press our government to sign and ratify the treaty. And if it still turns a deaf ear to us, we should speak to the people even more loudly and passionately. Moving to actions. Before concluding, I'm glad to be able to add a few words on the recent good news. On September 11th, Lenny Tamaki, the incumbent governor of Okinawa, supported by the All Okinawa Coalition, the Seán MacBride Prize winner, won the gubernatorial election. The focal point was whether to keep the whole island united to stop the ongoing construction of new US Marine base at Henoko, while pressing the closure of the existing Futenma Marine base, or to allow Okinawa to be turned into a chain of islands for even more intensive military operations of both US and Japanese forces in the growing tension of the US-China relations. In this struggle of which peace of Okinawa, Japan, and East Asia is at stake, Rainer Brown, Seán, Joe Garson, Corazon Fabros, and many other friends expressed their solidarity with the islanders. I deeply thank you. The success was won by the islanders through the ballot box, which opened prospects of peace for all Japanese to choose. Like Okinawans, will unite to stop the move of Japan, or to turn Japan into a war-waging country, prevent the revision of our peace constitution, and make Japan join the TPNW as our only able country. Once again, I thank the IPB and all its members. Will our future be a world of peace, justice without nuclear weapons, or one that keeps narrowing on the verge of the devil's day? Our actions hold the key to our future. I wish you every success in your valuable actions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Taka-san. We shall now listen first to two speeches. One from Douglas Roche, Canadian Senator and former Canadian Ambassador for Disarmament. And then from Terumi Tanaka, co-chairperson of Nihon Hidankyo, one of the leaders of the Hibakusha in Japan. So do we have it, Theo? Yeah.
Dear Hiroshi Taka, it is an honor to salute you on the occasion of your receiving the prestigious Seán MacBride Peace Prize for your distinguished work as Executive Director of Gensuikyo, a central organization of the Japanese peace movement and one of the essential organizers of the worldwide peace congresses in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I speak to you today and to our friends in the worldwide peace movement as an honorary citizen of Hiroshima. Hiroshima and Nagasaki represent the supreme tragedy of humanity, which must never be repeated. You, Taka, and your colleagues in Gensuikyo have stayed faithful through the years to the pledge of never again. Unfortunately, at this very moment, We live under a Russian threat to use nuclear weapons in the Ukraine war. The magnitude of the present crisis cannot be overstated. The sudden realization that nuclear weapons could be used has shaken public confidence in security systems. The risk of nuclear war has never been greater. Where did the world go wrong in getting to this fraught moment? It went wrong in using the atomic bomb in 1945 against Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It went wrong immediately after the horrendous first use in failing to construct international legal machinery to ban the development and possession of nuclear weapons. It went wrong when the major states built their military doctrines on the strategy of nuclear deterrence, which promised mutual assured destruction and led to a nuclear arms race. It went wrong in not enforcing the obligation under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to pursue comprehensive negotiations for the elimination of nuclear weapons. It went wrong when, after the Cold War, NATO, a nuclear-armed alliance, virtually encircled Russia. It went wrong when the nuclear states began their modernization programs, which steal money that should go to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Today's nuclear weapons crisis has many fathers. The political system is bogged down in casting blame. Several arms control treaties have been abandoned. There is no trust. The nuclear disarmament regime is in chaos. At the very moment when the world needs to pull together to deal with the COVID and climate crises, the remilitarization of our societies is taking place. The only winners today are the military-industrial complex. So we must turn our attention immediately to what we are going to do to remove the specter of nuclear war. What must be our priorities? First, of course, must be to stop the madness of the Ukraine war. All world leaders must demand a diplomatic resolution of this conflict. The problem of nuclear weapons must be brought back to the center of the political stage instead of being shunted off to the sidelines. The Ukraine war has shown how vital it is to maintain international machinery for peace and to abolish nuclear weapons. It is in everyone's interest to do so. The Non-Proliferation Treaty must be strengthened. This can be done by reaffirming the commitment by all states parties to the full and effective implementation of the Article 6 of the treaty and the unequivocal undertaking by the nuclear weapon states to accomplish the total elimination of their nuclear arsenals, leading to nuclear disarmament. The deterioration of nuclear disarmament in recent years must be overcome by a new commitment, as was agreed in 2010, to establish the necessary framework to achieve and maintain a world without nuclear weapons. This should include comprehensive negotiations on a nuclear weapons convention or a framework of mutually reinforcing instruments backed by a strong system of verification. It is precisely because past commitments have been so blatantly ignored that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons came into existence. In unequivocal language, the Prohibition Treaty declares that any use of nuclear weapons would be abhorrent to the principles of humanity and the dictates of public conscience. This historic treaty, now ratified by more than 60 states, exposes and stigmatizes nuclear weapons and their use as standing outside the norms of international humanitarian law. It challenges nuclear weapons states to finally act on their NPT commitment. Taka, your work on these issues for more than 50 years and your development of Gensuikyo has inspired countless persons around the world. The Japan Council Against Atomic and Hydrogen Bombs, a federation of 60 national organizations with a combined membership of 2.5 million people, has brought valuable petitions to the United Nations. We must thank Gensuikyo delegations for their regular travel to UN headquarters in New York to follow the first committee debate on disarmament issues, where they dialogue with members, states, and promote the adoption of resolutions seeking the elimination of nuclear weapons. I congratulate you for such valuable work, and I also commend the International Peace Bureau for its wisdom in selecting you as a recipient of the Seán MacBride Peace Prize. Both you and I, Taka, want the International Peace Bureau's role to grow as a bridge between grassroots peoples and the global cause of peace, justice, and a sustainable world free of nuclear weapons. This work has never been more vital. Again, Taka, I congratulate you warmly and wish you all the best.
Right, folks, I thought that Tanaka-san is not present online, but I'd like to call on him to give his greetings. So, Tanaka-san.
Thank you.
はい。日本語で話させていただきます。日本被団協の共同代表委員をしている田中であります。13歳の時に長崎で被爆した被爆者でもあります。高さん、2020年、22年のショーン・マックブライド平和賞受賞おめでとうございます。昨年の核兵器廃絶被爆者国際署名運動に対しても受賞し続き、日本元帥協の高さんが国の内外の核兵器廃絶運動のリーダーとしての貢献に対し、ショーン・マックブライド賞が贈られることに、原爆被害者の一人として二重の喜びを覚えます。改めておめでとうございます。1980年、代の半ばに、高さんが日本元帥協の国際担当責任者の任に就かれて、私たち日本の被爆者の国際的な活動、表現活動が非常に、多様になりました。さらに、高さんは事務局長を務められ、今、代表委員の今日まで、国の内外での高さんと被爆者との関わりは広く大きく強くなっております。具体的に挙げると大変なものになりますので、具体的にはお話できませんが、本当に日本の被爆者と高さんとしっかりと手をつないでいろんなことをやってきました。で、非依存的な兵器の犠牲者となった被爆者は再び同じ苦しみを人類の他の誰にも味わわせてはならないと 核兵器も戦争もない世界の実現を国の内外に必死に訴えてきました。タカさんは被爆者の国際的な役割をしっかりと受け止めてくださり、励まし続けてこられました。名前を挙げますと、山口千治、谷口住輝、岩佐美紀壮、小西悟、日田俊太郎、沢野節子さん、その他たくさん名前を挙げると挙げきれない人たちが一緒に頑張ってくれました。ただ残念ながら今この名前を挙げた人の中で生存しているのは沢野節子さんだけであります。他の人たちはもう高齢で他界しております。この人たちこういう人たちの被爆者の国際的な活動を本当に支えてくださったのがタカさんでありました。で、私が日本被団協の役員になってタカさんと親しくお世話になったのは1995年の頃だったかと思います。さまざまな国際会議にタカさんと同席し、あるいは同行したりして、いろんなことを学びました。で、タカさんの人柄に見せられると同時に、国際的な運動で大きな役割を果たしておられることを知る機会を得ました。今、お二人の方から詳しくご紹介になった活動だったわけです。で、著名な海外のリーダーの方々と友達のような関わりを持っておられることにも感服しておりました。で、タカさんは被爆者に向けられる温かい思いやりによく現れるように、虐げられた苦しんでいる者に対して優しい心を持っています。言葉少なではありますが、ユーモアもあり、温厚さと楽天性を持って私たちに勇気と励ましを与えてくださいます。タカさんは大の読書家でもあります。複雑な国際政治に関わるものの見方は知識と経験と情報に裏付けされ、明晰で的確で言葉少なではありますが、確かな判断力と指導性によって相手の信頼を勝ちてこられたと思います。私たちがそうであります。で、核兵器をめぐる国際情勢はロシアのウクライナへの侵攻、侵略により予想に反する長期化の混沌と混乱が続いております。解決のめどが立たない情勢にあります。プーチン大統領は核兵器の使用をたびたびほのめかし、国際法違反の威嚇を重ねています。核戦争の危機に直面しているように私どもには思います。高齢化した被爆者もタカさんや元帥教の仲間たちに励まされて、侵略戦争を直ちにやめよう。核兵器で威嚇をするな。使用するな。使用は許さないというアメリカ大使館へ申し入れの行動や大きな駅頭でのスタンディングを元帥教の皆さんと共同でやってきております。高齢化してきてなかなか大変ではありますけれども、これからもタカさんと一緒に、特にタカさんのもう一つ踏ん張りある働きを被爆者として被団協としてお願いしたいと思います。どうもありがとうございました。
Tanaka-san, arigatou gozaimashita. And now we shall listen to one of the leaders of the Korean peace movement from the People's Solidarity for Participatory Democracy. I'd like to call on Suyong Wang to give their greetings. Suyong.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Seán from the Center for Peace and Disarmament of PSPD based in Seoul. It is an honor to be here today. Congratulations to Hiroshi Taka on awarding the Seán MacBride Peace Prize. Thank you for his wonderful dedication to a world without nuclear weapons. The fear of nuclear war is increasing more than ever around the world. The war in Ukraine and Russia's threat to use nuclear weapons are making people nervous. Meanwhile, military tensions on the Korean Peninsula are rising and rising now. Talks have been suspended. South Korea, the US, and North Korea are continuing their military exercises in recent days. It is a tension between the nuclear weapon states. There is also a growing risk of nuclear war in this region, Northeast Asia. I think this award is even more meaningful at a time like this. I know that Gensuikyo was committed to creating the nuclear taboo and organizing many kinds of people. They tried really hard to make Hibakusha's voice known all over the world. They showed the world their vision of a world without nuclear weapons with steady activities. I learned a lot in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and got inspiration from the peace movement. Japan and Korea have the first and second most atomic bomb victims in the world. I believe that the civil society of Korea and Japan can cooperate together for a world without nuclear weapons, as we've done so far. So I'm really happy today. Once again, congratulations on the award. Thank you.
The next speaker, I think do not need an introduction, but I'd like to call on him now, Joseph Gerson of the United States, the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security. You have the floor.
Thank you, Cora. Oops, I guess I'm set. Taka, congratulations on being awarded the MacBride Prize, and thank you for your excellent speech. I wish I could be with you and with others in Ghent, and I'm happy to see many friends online. I need Taka to begin with an apology. Knowing how modest and self-effacing you are, I expect this ceremony is somewhat difficult for you. Worse, now you have to endure my remarks. So please accept my apologies. But please appreciate that those of us who have known, worked with, and been inspired by you want you and others to know how deeply we appreciate all that you have done for nuclear weapons abolition and human survival. For these, we want to honor you. Few people have been as sensitive to and as supportive of the Hibakusha in Japan and in other countries as you have. And few have more deeply internalized and acted on their wisdom that nuclear weapons and human beings cannot coexist. Tragically, criminally, as in past wars and confrontations, now in Ukraine and over Taiwan and Korea, human survival is again threatened by the increased dangers of nuclear war. That we have survived, and that Putin, US presidents, and other rulers of nuclear weapon states have since the Nagasaki bombing respected the taboo against attacking with nuclear weapons is in no small way the result of the world's nuclear disarmament movements, to which you have made enormous contributions and via Gensuikyo helped to lead. Sharing a memory, it was just over 20 years ago that a small international gathering was held in Seoul to launch a global movement against foreign military bases. Given the history of Japanese imperialism and its brutal colonization of Korea, the organizers were reluctant to invite you, but Cora Fabros and I gently insisted. The evening before the conference, there was a dinner in a small room where each of us were expected to introduce ourselves. With our Korean host suspicious of the unknown Japanese man, there was utter silence when you began to speak, with our host hanging judgmentally on every syllable you uttered. But as we expected, you passed the test with flying colors. That same integrity is what made you a trusted figure and now an elder within Gensuikyo, made it possible for you to work with elected officials across Japan and diplomats around the world, as well as building collaborations despite political divisions in the disarmament and peace movements in Japan. I remember organizing meetings you arranged with Gensuikyo, Peace Boat, and others as we built the MPT review mobilizations. Similarly, there have been strategies that you have helped to forge that built the collaborations that secured millions of abolition petition signatures that we presented to the presidents of the MPT review conferences and to UN High Representatives for Disarmament. Speaking personally, and I trust for others, I am grateful for this opportunity to thank you. With your encouragement, support, and risk-taking, you helped us become who we are and to make the contributions that we have. We are indebted to you for introducing us to Dr. Hida, Keiko Watanabe, Senji Yamaguchi, Sumitaro Taniguchi, Oishi Matashishi, and to the memories of Aikichi and Suzuyo Kobayama. They were among the most committed and courageous Hibakusha who made it impossible for the world to ignore the fundamental crimes of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Bikini, and the necessity of nuclear weapons abolition. You were the visionary who conceived and led the organizing for the global Hibakusha delegations and many speaking tours. Your insights into Japanese and Asian politics and geopolitics have been invaluable. And without the quiet roles that you and Gensuikyo have played, our massive MPT review mobilizations and conferences would have been shadows of what they became. People who don't know you well, can only imagine the dailiness, the patience, the countless conversations, the untold number of meetings, the difficult compromises, the stress, and your generosity that have been part and parcel of all that you have accomplished. This will embarrass you, but to help others understand why you are receiving the MacBride Prize, I want to share something you once told me. In a personal conversation about a decade ago, I asked how you were able to simultaneously and so successfully hold together your roles in nurturing and helping build Gensuikyo's grassroots movement, its relations and collaborations with the world's nuclear disarmament movements, and engagements with diplomats from Malaysia and Egypt to senior UN officials. You took a moment to reflect, and then you answered with quiet humility, "It is excruciating." This is the commitment and the sacrifice that we are all called upon to make if humanity is to survive the existential threats posed by nuclear weapons and now climate catastrophe. Finally, let me say that back in ancient history, in my youth, I was privileged to know Seán MacBride. I am certain that he would take great pride in you, and by extension, Gensuikyo, for being honored with the Peace Prize being given in his name. Taka, domo arigato.
Moving towards the end of our ceremony this morning, and to properly close, give the greetings. I don't know whether we will enjoy or we will endure a speech from our co-president, Philip Jennings.
Thank you, Cora, and thank you everybody for this opportunity. It's a great honor and privilege for me to close this session, which has given due global recognition to our friend Taka. My name is Philip, but your name is much, much better. I am going to be talking to my mother to see if she can adopt my name of Taka Jennings, because if you're a fighter for peace, it sounds much more purposeful and determined, and puts fear in your adversaries when you say, "I now give the floor to Taka Jennings." We are often asked in this movement, what can I do? I'm just a person. I am a human being. What can I do? What contribution can I make? And sometimes people have a sense that they are somewhat helpless. And I think the example that you give us, I've been told of your modesty, that you are reserved. You don't like to draw attention to yourself, that you're someone that likes to work in a team. And I think your example to young people and to people of all generations, that if you feel shy, that if you have a sense of not having the self-confidence, that your example and your ability of overcoming your reserved nature to build trust with people is an example to every citizen on the planet, that even if you are shy and reserved and you don't want to stand out in the crowd, you can still do something. And what you have done, even from this shyness and from this manner that you have, is that this has not been a handicap to take on the biggest threats to mankind and to this world and to humanity. And we recognize this talent. And I think it gives a great sense of comfort to us that you have done this, but also a reassuring message that wherever you are in life, whatever your station in life, that if you don't want to stand out, that you can still make a contribution, that you can still take a stand, that even if you whisper your arguments and not shouting from rooftops, you can still make a difference. You can galvanize, you can build trust, and you can build confidence. I listened to the song that they sang in your honor, and the song started with the blue and clear skies. If I got the words right, the blue and clear skies. 60 years ago was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I was 9 years old at the time. And it was when I was walking to school. It was a day, an October day, an autumn day of clear and blue skies when I was a child. And I looked at the sky and I saw the jet stream from an aeroplane, that vapor cloud behind. And in my child's innocence, looking at the sky in terms of wonder and its mystery, I said to my friends, I think that's a nuclear missile on its way somewhere. And it's often, I refer to this often, I know for the friends that have got to know me in the IPB, but there I am, a 9-year-old child, thinking, reacting to this vapor trail that even in that young and tender age, that you're almost not accepting, but realizing that this danger is present. And of course, we were boys at that time and we just got on with the day. But I've never forgotten that moment, that when we look to our sky and its majesty, that the sky is also one that can be full of this threat that you have spent your life trying to eliminate. I think the best thing that we can do to you, Taka, at this stage in your life is to give you a promise. Frankly, it's a promise that the commitment that we all have is a permanent one. And I'm sure there have been times in your own life and in the life of Gensuikyo and Hidankyo, will the world forget? Will the world forget what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Will somehow this just become something that blows with the wind and blows away in another direction? And I think the example that you give and the work that you have done means that all of us must make this very solemn promise, both as this generation and for coming generations. And as the Hibakusha move on in their lives and pass away, hopefully in gentleness and at peace, that we make this permanent commitment, that what we are really doing here is reassuring you that we make this eternal promise to the people of Nagasaki, to the people of Hiroshima, and to citizens everywhere, that whatever the power structures are in the world, that we as people make this eternal promise that we will never forget, and we will never allow people to forget, that we will not allow the conversation to become normalized, that it becomes part of the way that world thinks, yeah, we have a nuclear weapon and we're safer because of it. And we realize at this moment in time, with all these new threats that we see, with the threats of use, the reckless threats of use, for me, that in itself, when someone articulates that they will threaten to use nuclear weapon, that in itself is a crime against humanity. It's a crime against humanity. And what worries me now is that it becomes normalized all of a sudden. A nuclear bomb, the consequences, we can deal with it. A nuclear bomb detonated in the theater of war. It's not a theater of war. We're talking about people's lives and civilization. That somehow we can survive and life can move on. And we have to combat this argument, and we have to create our narrative in terms of that these weapons, that it must not enter into the conversation and the narrative of political leaders of whatever their political color, that we can accept their use. Your message and the example that you bring is more important now than ever, as everybody said. And I particularly, the words of Douglas Roche resonated very powerfully with me about what went wrong. You're important. Your message has never been more important. Your example has never been more important. And to take the message to a broader and new generations of our public. We've seen the NPT failure and how frustrating this must have been. I can imagine the joy and the expectation that you would have had 50 years ago when this treaty was first established, that at last there is a commitment to good faith negotiations to eliminate these weapons. And I can imagine the joy. I can imagine the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and saying, at last this world has taken a stand and shown their determination. And we have the P5 powers on the back foot in this regard. And how disappointing it must be to see that even with the last treaty negotiations that they finished without conclusion, but that doesn't mean to say that we give up hope, that we do not remain silent. As Martin Luther King said, silence is betrayal. And we will not betray your cause and what you stand for. We recognize the efforts that you make to mobilize the peace boat, the peace wave, the signature campaigns, insisting that civil society embraces this argument. And we have the hope now of a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And this takes me back to this idea of permanence and commitment. Now that we have the first meeting of the states parties behind us, and a second one, and then a third one, and a fourth one, this makes it a permanent, but it must not become a routine consideration. Oh, it's the meeting of the states parties. This gives this permanent commitment, this permanent endeavor, an institutional building where there is no escape from the stigmatization of nuclear weapons and the delegitimization of nuclear weapons. And from the passion and the movement that brought the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, we now have the TPNW, and the themes of your work to make the prohibition universal is now accepted from the Vienna Action Plan. That the inclusion of civil societies in the process, which has never really happened previously, that there's now a direct commitment to help the people and the places where these bombs were exploded and where they were tested, and particularly the indigenous people. They talk of the gender role in disarmament, and now to have an intercessional structure, which I know is bureaucratic language, but what we're building is the mechanics and the machinery that this promise that we make to you is permanent and is driven, and there is a place for us. So in conclusion, I want to congratulate you, Taka, for your contribution. I hope that this has been meaningful for you and for all our friends in Japan, in Nagasaki and Hiroshima in particular. I hope that for future generations, we can look to those blue skies, not with fear, but with the mystery, but with passion and in peace, that those blue skies are never threatened ever with the use of nuclear weapons. On behalf of the IPB, I thank you, and I thank all of the board and the council present for giving me this opportunity to send you this personal message of thanks and gratitude. Thank you.
always inform our mind, but especially touch our hearts. We cannot leave the room without, thanking some people. And I'd like to thank first our interpreters, Rieko Asato and Misuki Nakamura on the Japan side. And also our IPB team, Seán, Mia, Alessandra, Nina, and Theo, for making this moving MacBride ceremony truly meaningful today. And to Brother, of course, who hosted us in their home. Thank you very much, Brother. So friends, that ends our MacBride ceremony today. And we're now ready with a closing statement, a closing photo op